Hey everybody, here at home on my laptop, um, making a reaction video to Donald Trump's announcement, I guess, yesterday. And, yeah, making a reaction also to Karen Bass winning the mayoral race. So let's talk about Donald Trump first. What can I say about Donald Trump? Not much. It's hard to say anything about Donald Trump because he's the most talked about guy. Like everybody's talking about him all the time. Really, they talk too much about him. But in 2016, I didn't think. I mean, I seriously didn't think that he was going to win the primaries, and he did. And then I didn't think he was going to be elected, and then he did. So in that sense, I'm loath to make predictions. But if you really think about that race, the entire election, if you really think about it, 2016 was not about Donald Trump winning. It was about people voting for what they did like. I mean, yes, there were some racists out there that were very loud, but we tend to define politics sometimes incorrectly by focusing on loud people. And that's not what really did it. What really did it is people were voting against the establishment. That's what did it. And no one embodies the establishment like Hillary Clinton, right? So, in effect, the Democrats lost. It wasn't that Donald Trump won, it's that the Democrats dropped the ball. And in the primaries, when Donald Trump went out there and ran, what was actually going on was people were reacting to his anti establishment message. That's what they were reacting to. And of course, there were a lot of things that he said that sort of, let's say, gelled with Rush Limbaugh and with Fox News and all the stuff that Republicans had been hearing since at least the late 90s. So those media outlets sort of groomed and prepared Donald Trump's candidacy. That's true, but he also was anti establishment. And his anger at the press, and because if you think back to the cycle before that, before 2016, 2012, Newt Gingrich was a very successful candidate. Now, why? Every single time his numbers went up among Republicans, it's because he was angry. And he was yelling at the media in particular and yelling at liberal elites. And people really ate that up with a spoon, right? So he was sort of a proto Trump. That's why he won. And or excuse me, well, that's why Donald Trump won. That's why Newt Gingrich was going to win, but then he dropped the ball in the Florida debate and lost that debate against Mittens Romney. So anyway, that's water under the bridge. But I think that anger was always there under the surface with Republican voters because all of their primary debates are about who can be the biggest caveman, right? Or who's the biggest caveman. So anyway, that's what that cycle was about in 2016, anti-establishment politics. He came out of the primary, and then his nominee. So I'm not going to get into that whole thing about the Democratic primaries 2016, but his nominee was the Democratic nominee was the best candidate that Trump could have asked for. See, all that time Hillary Clinton was thinking the best Republican opponent I could have is Donald Trump. But in reality, it was the other way around. The best opponent that Donald Trump could ask for was Hillary Clinton. See, one of the reasons I know this is because if you look at the primary results inside of the Democratic Party in the Midwest, uh, Bernie Sanders was winning handily over Hillary Clinton in those, like in Michigan and places like that in the Midwest. But it wasn't enough. especially with the superdelegates. It wasn't enough to beat Hillary. But if you fast forward to the 2020 primaries, Joe Biden won those same Midwestern primaries against Bernie Sanders. Now, why? It's because Bernie Sanders was not that popular in the Midwest. It was because Hillary Clinton was the embodiment of craven, focus group tested, inauthentic politics. And some people in labor remembered her from the 90s and NAFTA and all that. That's true. But she also came across as being fake and standing for nothing. So she got clobbered in the presidential election. I mean, she stood to lose a lot of ground in places like Michigan, where she never won in the primary. So I don't know why she thought she was going to carry the state. She took it for granted and took Wisconsin for granted. Did not run a proper get out the vote campaign. Did not go there physically to Wisconsin and to Michigan in the general election. That's already criminal. But the bottom line is she was not liked, and it was an uphill battle with her. Um, so it really wasn't about Donald Trump being brilliant so much as the fact that people were just, to use an older phrase, in an ornery mood. And then, I mean, so he got lucky, okay? And then 2020 rolled around and the karma reversed itself. So all of a sudden his talking points weren't effective. He just was talking about the same crap over and over that didn't matter. And then COVID also helped to kill him because white older men defected, which you can't win as a Republican if white older men are abandoning you. And so he was very unlucky there with COVID. I think it's an open question as to whether you can defeat an incumbent president, even Donald Trump, because as an incumbent you have natural advantages. People don't like to change horses in midstream, to use Lincoln's phrase. So he probably would have won. He probably would have beaten Biden had it not been for COVID. And in that sense, he got unlucky. It was the exact opposite of 2016. So again, it wasn't so much that Donald Trump. Uh, it, it wasn't so much that Donald Trump lost or did fail to win. It was that Biden. I mean, Biden. It was Biden won because he got lucky. Anyway, this situation now, 2024, is totally different. COVID's gone, but now you have a rising superstar from Florida, Governor DeSantis. And my opinion on that is that it really is going to come down to it's hard for me to get into the Republican thinking space, but it's going to come down to whether people are going to believe the words that come out of Donald Trump's mouth, because he's going to be very egomaniacal. He's going to be very self-obsessed. And if you watch the interview that he did, Donald Trump, with Stuart Varney, you'll see how he's beginning to lose his touch. Um, it's the same boring talking points all the time, and it doesn't necessarily speak to people. Some of his most effective moments, Donald Trump's most effective moments, is when he sort of went off script and started talking about how the Bush family lied about the war, and how he was simultaneously suggesting he might be progressive while at the same time being racist, if that makes any sense. I think he's kind of lost his touch, and I think it's hard to argue with success, which is what DeSantis represents right now. So it's going to be very difficult. It remains to be seen how this is going to go, but my guess is that there's Trump fatigue within the Republican Party. I know there is by the establishment. Apparently, most of the billionaires are supporting DeSantis But how that's going to translate to with the rank and file, I don't know. So that's interesting. But if I were a betting person, which I'm not, I would bet on DeSantis. Anyway, on this mayoral race, my opinion on it, on the LA mayor's race, just very quickly to finish up this video, is probably what happened. I'm not 100% sure, but probably what happened is that the San Fernando Valley is just simply not reliably, this might ruffle some feathers, but the San Fernando Valley is just not reliably as white as they used to be. And I think that's what's the subtext here. I think, and it's important to look at the subtext because, like, for example, I was just talking about DeSantis. The subtext of DeSantis versus Trump is that they both feel they can be elected president because we're headed into a recession right now. People don't want to talk about it, but it's an engineered recession, engineered by the Fed, our central bank. And so they think that whoever's left holding the ball is going to lose, which is the Democrats, because they're in charge of the Senate nominally and they have the White House. So that's the subtext of this. The subtext of Bass versus Caruso was whether or not white people or people of color who identified as white because they were homeowners, whether they were going to be angry at the homelessness issue and whether or not they were going to be scared of crime enough to to vote for Caruso. If he was going to get enough people of color to basically vote white, that was really the subtext. And what ended up happening is he spent $140 million when you add the initial run plus the runoff. He spent a lot of money, and he buried us in ads. I was watching Caruso ads. I had to come offline because the Caruso ad kept coming up, and it was all over radio and television, and we were inundated with this message. And it's a powerful message for reasons I described in my past video. And if we want to discuss it in the comment section, yeah, go ahead and ask me, and I'll talk some more about it because I have experience with that, of how he comes across and what it means to people who aren't really thinking about issues. They just watch TV. And so it was a very powerful thing, and he managed to convert a lot of people who were undecided. But the bottom line is that people of color, I don't think, are going to go for this kind of guy because they are suspicious about what a get tough on crime guy will do. Because part of his image was that he was going to clean up the streets. And that is a difficult thing to do in a city like Los Angeles. Because what's going on is that there are a lot of homeless encampments throughout the metropolitan area. And it's starting to spill over into surrounding areas. And people want to do something about the homelessness issue. I'm going to do a video on that in the future, by the way, explaining what I think is going on. But petty crimes are also going up because the economy's bad and people are suffering. And so in this atmosphere, Rick Caruso tried to run by getting tough on crime. And then later, when he finished second in the initial primary, he had to moderate his message. But I think that stuck in a lot of voters' minds because nobody wants a West Coast Bloomberg. Because that's basically what that means. You're going to come in, you're going to increase the police force, you're going to arrest a lot of people of color through racial profiling, you're going to crack a lot of skulls, you're going to forcibly remove homeless people. Where are you going to put them? I mean, these are issues that have to be addressed in some intelligent way. And building, I mean, neither Bass nor Caruso at the end had a convincing answer. I'm a leftist, so of course I'm going to say that. Because you really can't build shelters for the homeless. You have to build low to no cost homes. They need homes, and they need large areas, and we need a lot of mental health We need to spend a lot of money on mental health resources, and we need to mobilize local people. In other words, instead of grabbing somebody who lives in Whittier to come down to LA, we need to say, hey, we have some homeless people in Echo Park. You live in Echo Park. Let's go and talk to them with some psychological and medical professionals. Let's see if we can, first of all, create an address for them so they can, if they want employment, they can use this address for their correspondence. Uh, we need to find a way to create a system of banking for the poor. I mean, there are all these things that have to happen that are creative solutions, but that run head in to the problems. And the main problem being, of course, uh, capitalism, because that's what's driving a lot of these problems. Rick Caruso himself has contributed to homelessness in Southern California. So asking him, a real estate developer who's driven rents and property values up, asking him to deliver us from that is just a tremendously stupid proposition. Sorry. Um, but anyway, I think that's what happened. I think people were not willing to trust a white guy right now. And certainly not one who's been on the police commission and who was a former Republican for a long time. As I said, one of the heavy hitters in terms of his contributions to the Republican Party. Anyway, so those are my reactions. I will probably make a video soon. I hope to make a video in the next couple of weeks talking about fleshing out a little bit more what I meant by housing and homelessness in Southern California. Um, I hope you guys are good. Please leave your comments and your questions. Do me a favor, like, subscribe, and I'll see you here on the next one.